On today's Locked On Texans podcast, a little offseason talk with Aaron Wilson. Where has he seen the most growth from the Houston Texans squad, including veteran Tytus Howard? That's going to be a fun conversation. And just overall, how confident is he in the Houston Texans as they prepare for the 2025 season?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Battle Red Nation, from H-Town to your town. Today's podcast and every podcast is for Texan fans all around. Welcome to the Locked On Texans Podcast. I'm your Texans football analyst and credential media member, the John Hickman. Super excited for today's podcast. We'll be joined by Aaron Wilson to get his offseason conversation, right? What has his thoughts been on this Houston Texans team as they go into year two? Going to dive a little bit into Tytus Howard's growth without Laremy Tunsil on the side of him. What kind of player, what kind of leadership should we expect from Tytus Howard this upcoming year? We'll close out the show looking at year two, Calen Bullock. Houston added CJ Gardner-Johnson. We already know Kamari Lassiter. We already know about Derek Stingley Jr. But with the recent news of Jimmy Ward, how much does that change the trajectory of Calen Bullock going into his sophomore year? And I think we're going to see a much better version of a rookie that kicked off his NFL career in an electric way, right? He had a very good rookie year. Today's podcast is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. I want to shout out all of our everydayers from the Himalayas. Thank you for checking out the Locked On Texans podcast, making this show your first listen of the day. And now we got Texans talk getting ready to come straight to your front door with Aaron Wilson. Let's talk Texans. As promised, we got my boy Aaron Wilson of KPRC. Aaron Wilson does a lot of everything, especially when it comes to the NFL. But you guys know him for the Texans space, right? And that's where we want to kick it off with, Aaron. Off-season talk with you, man. What's been your thoughts so far on the Houston Texans off-season, starting with the firing of Bobby Slowick to mandatory minicamp?
Right, that's the most dramatic change, with the exception of trading five-time Pro Bowl left tackle Laremy Tunsil. But, firing Bobby and shifting to Nick Caley, these are major watershed changes to the offense. There have been lots of other important moves, but I believe none that equal firing the offense coordinator, putting in a whole new playbook, and firing the offensive line coach and promoting Cole Popovich to head offensive line coach and run game coordinator, giving that additional title. Obviously, a close background with Nick Caley from their time working for Bill Belichick, working with Dante Scarnecchia, and Josh McDaniels. So a lot of influences there. But to me, other than the Tunsil trade, that is the biggest story of the Texans offseason.
Where is your confidence level right now in Houston's ability, especially on the offensive side of the ball, to get over the humps? And the humps for Houston, I'm not going to say Buffalo, but I will say Kansas City. I will say Baltimore. Now, obviously, it's early in the offseason. We're not in training camp, but do you feel like, based off of what you've been able to see, that they've made steps in the right direction?
Steps in the right direction. And two things can be true. They could be better and still be, in terms of stage of the playoffs, just as unsuccessful this year. And when I say that, I mean they could be a better overall offensive production, one of the elite defenses, and it still may not be enough. It's a very tough conference. So when you talk about some of the teams that you mentioned, Kansas City, Super Bowl perennial team, usually they win it. This past year they didn't. Run into a great Philadelphia team. You got the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen. Highly competitive. Yes, they beat them last year. They had a great defensive game plan. Didn't see that in the playoffs, though, so they didn't meet them. They've had a lot of problems with Baltimore. Thoroughly dominated on Christmas Day. These playoff game the year before, they definitely owe the Ravens one. So just for me to say, well, they're better, everything will be different, I don't think that's logical thinking. To me, these other teams, they continue to get better, and they continue to be as well coached as anyone in the NFL. When you're talking about John Harbaugh, Andy Reid, and all of those guys, Sean McDermott, excellent coach in his own right. So as good as DeMeco is, I still feel like, are the Texans there? And a lot of them, we'll get into it, is the offensive line. Can they go from bad to solid? And that's the biggest question mark to me facing the Texans. But you solve that one thing, it doesn't necessarily mean all of a sudden they take that next step. I can't predict the future. I just have to judge it like everyone, have my opinion, and what I think they're like on paper. But did they get better? Yes. I think addition by subtraction, firing Bobby was not receptive to feedback from players, other coaches, wasn't listening to ideas, wasn't making good halftime adjustments, wasn't running a good game plan, was having some tough relationships with players where they were complaining to us behind Bobby's back. So I would say he had lost the locker room and it was time for change. So far, they like Caley, but they haven't been in a game with him yet. He hasn't called a game yet. But I like his background with Sean McVay and Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels. And I feel like he's very well trained and ready for this moment. And I've talked to a significant amount of coaches about Nick, including guys in the college ranks like the University of Minnesota run game coordinator and offensive line coach Brian Callahan, no relation to Titans coach. And they worked with him as he climbed the ladder at schools like Akron and Eastern Illinois. I even talked to the head coach at John Carroll University when he was a student assistant there. And they all said the same thing. Smart, ambitious, connects really well with players. I haven't done this story in a while, but he was the recruiter for Azeez Al-Shire at Florida Atlantic. And he was successful in recruiting him to come there. And he had to adjust to some of the things with Aziz's family situation. They're living in a, just kind of rat trap hotel. And he didn't want recruiters to come to his house, come to the hotel, because the family was technically homeless. But yeah, I've sensed emotional intelligence and some intensity, a little bit of edge with Nick. The vibe I get is that him and CJ Stroud are a good collaboration. But remember, CJ praised Slowick, and but I think this letting CJ have the ownership of the offense, letting him change protections, letting him have this autonomy. To me, that's what you want to do with a young quarterback that's on the threshold of becoming a great quarterback. And they're watching old Tom Brady tape from 2003, 2004. They're going back. And ideally, like what Brady did, Brady was like his own offensive coordinator in a way, because he was running the show. And that's what you want to have with CJ Stroud, where he runs the show, where he's the architect of the offense, and he's building these game plans, not just Nick Caley. Yeah. Partnership.
Some of the biggest stories surrounding the Houston Texans right now. We'll dive into maybe the biggest one recently in the second segment, but mandatory minicamps was last week, right? And before that period, CJ wasn't throwing. A lot of people was freaking out. But we got a chance to see CJ get out there and throw, and he was dropping some dimes in the bucket. What would you say are your three positive takeaways from minicamp?
Right. We'll start with CJ. So I reported this after DeMeco initially was stonewalling about CJ, other than emphasizing that he's fine, players are on different schedules, and then I believe Nick Caley saying that nothing to see here, he's fine. Well, it got everyone's antenna up, and I thought some members of the press and certainly the fan base, they were panicking and they were freaking out and they were acting like this is some kind of conspiracy and what's going on. And so I like to deal in facts. So I did some digging and I talked to 4 different sources, and they all told me the same thing, that he had shoulder tightness from weightlifting and throwing, and that it wasn't a big deal, and that he never had surgery. And I reported that, and people still acted like, oh, this isn't true. I think there's more to this. They're just so skeptical. And I understand the time of year, and people think, oh, why can't he throw? He was throwing just a few weeks before, and it was on video. There's no secret surgery. The people that thought he had surgery, they were really ridiculous. There was no procedure. You don't just have surgery and then you were throwing, now you can't throw, then you can throw again. There was really nothing to hide. Do I think they could have been more transparent, the Texans, and just said his arm's a little tired, it's not a big deal? If they had done that, it wouldn't have been a story. But they don't have to give injury reports in the offseason. So they're not required to do that until technically the Wednesday before the first regular season game. So when they don't update in the offseason, they feel like that's messing with their competitive advantage. We don't have to do that. Why should we over cooperate? And so that's their choice. But that doesn't mean that we can't, as journalists, do some reporting and find out more. So two things can be true. They could have said more, but it doesn't mean that it was bad. He was throwing, and there were videos from the team, if you look at their social media closely, when the players were having informal sessions. That was only a couple weeks before when they had the off-season conditioning program. They started that. So whether CJ is throwing before us, he was throwing privately with his teammates. And so I just thought that was ridiculous. And just like Joe Mixon was in a walking boot, have they ever told you that? No, but he was in a walking boot. And now he's in an ankle brace at his football camp. And so do I think he'll be okay for training camp? Yes. But as far as positives, I thought Jaden Higgins, the explosiveness, the one-handed catches, to me, he really kind of stole the show. I thought that was outstanding. I thought another positive was the way Christian Kirk was catching the football. I know he had that one drop, but overall the safety valve. And then on, defense, there were a lot of standouts, but I thought some of the plays I saw from Calen Bullock, especially that one on Nico Collins to break up the pass, showed me that he's taking another step in his development. He was excellent as a rookie. He's not that much bigger and stronger. I don't know if he can get – he's probably always going to be kind of slim. That's just who he is, his physique and his metabolism. But to me, he looks like he's ready to do more this year. If I was to tell you, Will Anderson Jr. and Daniil Hunter were dominant and they're amazing. Okay, what else is new? That's a great pass rushing tandem. Was the offensive line ready for that? Nope, they weren't. And it wasn't like they were terrible. It's just like those guys are great, and they have to block guys like that in games. I don't really like to judge offensive lines based on these practices where you can't really hit, because that's their equalizer when you can put your hands on somebody and actually drive and make some contact. And this is patty cake out there. This isn't really the time to judge the offensive line.
Well, speaking of offensive linemen, Houston will need one of those guys to be the anchor that they need on that offensive line, Tytus Howard. So we'll talk about his growth. You had an opportunity to talk to him. And then we're going to dive into some more important breaking news surrounding one player that may or may not be a Texan in 2025. We got more Texan talk on the way. However, there's nothing like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere you must experience live in this year's matchups. Delivering. OKC, Indy, those guys have been those two teams are putting on a very good NBA Finals. And if you want in, Gametime makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app go down closer to tip-off, and with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Gametime is a total game changer. And also, they got those zone deals. They're offering 10% off exclusive zone deals for FIFA World Cup matchups. You guys need to check in on that. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the app right now, create an account, and use code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. You'll find great seats for as low as $100 thanks to exclusive discounts. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back, Locked On Texan listeners and viewers. Thank you for staying locked in on Locked On. Got more Aaron Wilson here on the show with us today. Aaron, you had an opportunity to speak with Tytus Howard. In that conversation, he mentioned taking more on as a leadership role. Said he's all in, doing the best he can to transform his body. He does look more like a guard now compared to a tackle, but also transforming his daily habits. What can you tell us about Tytus Howard that we should expect for 2025?
I see him being a guard, and I don't think they're going to put him at tackle. Do I think he could have played any position on the line except for center? Yes, I do. I think he could easily have been their best left tackle, their best right tackle, and I think he'll be their best guard. You look at Titus, and there's a reason why he was drafted in the first round. He's a big, strong, mobile guy, and he's had a lot of experience. He's been able to play a ton of positions. He's just getting used to the footwork over at right guard, but it's not much different. It's just a few steps over from where he was lined up at left guard. And I thought that it kind of, I know some fans, they only think about the one play where he got beat against Detroit, and then he kind of bumped into CJ, and people thought he was trying to take the ball from him and run with it. He said that was not the case. It's one of the reasons that he took down Twitter. He said it was just getting out of control, a lot of the negativity, people coming at him and tagging him and adding him. What's he supposed to do? Reply to all that? He's got to focus on playing. And, in talking with him, I sense a good attitude and an aggressiveness and a leadership quality. And a lot of this, too, is him wanting to make his new coach very proud, Cole Popovich, who's got that feisty mentality, former Fresno State All-American offensive lineman, used to work for the Patriots. Dante Scarnecchia, a protege, Dante Scarnecchia being one of the best offensive linemen in NFL history.
Yes.
So he learned from him, and they were grooming him to be the guy in New England. Didn't want to take the COVID vaccine, left under those reasons, and took up high school coaching, then Troy University, where he coached Jake Andrews, the new projected starting center. And, Titus talked about under Cole wanting to have a nasty line that will hit people in the mouth. It sounds great. I know a lot of fans love to hear that. They would love to see it even more. So they've got to deliver on these words. I think that it's good to at least hear a fired up, feisty Tytus Howard saying that they're underestimated. They've got a chip on their shoulder. That's great. I mean, they've been talked about, and, deservedly so. There's been some criticism. But, I mean, has some of it, John, been a little over the top? They're acting like these guys are just, the worst offensive line in football. I don't think they were. I do think there were communication problems between Strausser and some of the guys, and Strausser was viewed to be checked out. And their hope is that coaching will bring the best out of these players. But it's really a almost entirely different line, except for that right side of Tytus Howard and Blake Fisher. So you got a new starting center, probably, Jake Andrews, unless Jared Patterson somehow regains first string status. Right now he doesn't have it. Former Pro Bowl lineman Laken Tomlinson. Best football's probably behind him, but been a reliable, durable starter. And then Cam Robinson. Cam has been pretty good for the Jaguars and the Vikings and helped them out when they had a season-ending injury to their left tackle. I look at it overall and think if they can somehow get Ariante Ursary into the lineup at either left tackle or right tackle, if he's able to handle it as a rookie, and some rookies aren't ready, see if they can get him ready. They have the makings of a line that might at least go from an F or D grade to a C. If that C can become a C plus, maybe this offense can take the next step. Because with better protection, I'm telling you, CJ's stats would have been so much better last year.
Yeah,
and we would have taken my hits. But woulda, coulda, shoulda, right? So it's a new year. It's a new day for the Texans offensive line. And I like what I'm hearing from Titus. I enjoyed our conversation. I know a lot of fans that have watched the video now that I posted of Titus. They're excited too. So there's still a lot of doubters. There's some people that don't want to. But, it's not about what all the fans think. It's about what these guys do. I'm a big actions speak louder than words. Obviously, we're in the words business. But the facts always, and the film never lies, always tells the truth. And can't wait to see these offensive linemen. I'm taking kind of a long view of this, a big picture view. It's not just about the Rams game. It's about the entire season being a treatise on what the offensive line is like and what they're going to be like in 2025. 6, which I think is going to be significantly different. Lots of guys on one-year deals.
Yeah.
They are in flux. Lots of change, not stability on the line. Not much stability at all, really. It's just a lot of change.
I do like how Titus, he'll get out there in those Texan streets. Like, he'll stream, he'll interact with a lot of the fans. He'll play Madden with you. When I look at the expectation for Tytus Howard this year, I do look at that leadership quality and the growth in him as a player in terms of being a leader. How much of that do you feel or have you seen kind of rub off on Blake Fisher? Because I still think Blake Fisher is a question mark for Houston. And I like Blake, but he's refined his body. But is it going to hold up against NFL talent? Not necessarily a positive minicamp, right? But he's going up against Neil Hunter and Will Anderson. That's kind of tough. But
right,
you feel like with Tytus Howard's ability to be able to move around, he's played almost every position. He's played every position but center. He'll be able to kind of coach up on the field from a player perspective, Blake Fisher, to be ready for 2025.
I think he'll be beneficial. I think it'll be beneficial to Blake. I think Blake has worked hard this offseason to, as you said, refine his body, kind of recomposition some of his weight. He looks better to me. Remember, he was only 21 years old last year. He's a very young rookie, and so he's matured on and off the field. I think he's better physically. And I see some upside still from Blake. Remember, they picked him in the second round for a reason. He was All-American at Notre Dame. Yes, he'll be pushed by Ursary, but I don't sense that Ursary is ready to take the job yet. We'll know more when the pads come on. Can Blake hold his own when he can actually have the equalizer of contact? For people that watch someone or they read that the guy beats you around the edge, so this is what it takes. It's all speed. It's not about, hey, I jammed him, and I held him off, and he couldn't get past. He couldn't long arm. He couldn't swim move. He couldn't do all these things. He couldn't rip me. If you're out there against a 4.5 type of speed guy or 4.4 in Danielle Hunter's case, they're going to run around you, and you're going to look bad. And a lot of that is it's not contact practices. You can judge a little bit better when there's at least some thud. And they get after a little bit. They, have some hitting. I would say for the offensive line, their failures are magnified in these non-contact shorts kind of practices.
Absolutely.
So I just think anyone, and I think we have a lot of younger, I don't want to sound like the old head, but I've been doing the NFL for a while. I've learned that you should not overreact to mini camps, good or bad. Yeah. But it's what we do. Because we're trying to have an audience, and you can't just be boring and say, yeah, these practices don't matter. If I was to sit here and tell you this isn't that important or no big deal or whatever, well, why listen to us? What will be the point? But yeah, John, as far as Blake, I would say he's the most vulnerable of the group to possibly lose his starting job that he has right now. He gave 3 sacks in the playoff game. He needs to show improvement each and every day. And Ursary had first-round grades from a lot of people, and he's the Big Ten Offensive Lineman of the Year, and he did a good job on Abdul Carter. He was an All-American. Ursary is no slouch, and he's the biggest guy they've got other than Trent Brown, biggest healthy guy. Trent is, of course, 6'8", 380, the biggest lineman in the NFL. And we haven't talked about him yet because he's not healthy yet. But if he was to get in the mix, potentially other than Titus, do I think he's the best right tackle? A healthy Trent Brown, sure. I don't know if he'll ever be healthy. But, if you were just to say, what's the best 5? Could Trent Brown be one of the best 5? Certainly feels that way to me.
I've always said if Trent Brown is healthy and motivated, he'll be the best right tackle in terms of beating out Blake Fisher. Now, where fans may not overreact or some fans may be ready to move on, Aaron, I wanted to ask you about Jimmy Ward. Is there any information that you are comfortable sharing about Jimmy Ward's situation right now?
I'm comfortable, yeah. And I would just preface this by saying this is a serious legal situation. We take it seriously at KPRC. I take it seriously, and the Texans take it seriously. I can tell you a lot of what I've heard. Some things I'm just not going to delve into. So I'm just going to make a few comments here, and these are based on facts. Yes, it was surprising to see Jimmy Ward in this felony, 3rd-degree family violence situation with an accusation of choking, threatening, and having this altercation with his fiance and baby's mother. And so they have a child together. They have a boy. They had an altercation, and she called the police on him. And the arrest was at about 5:38 in the morning last week. He has now been freed on a $30,000 bond. He's in the process of hiring an attorney. This is a very serious situation, and the NFL is watching. They will analyze this situation under their personal conduct policy. They will conduct their own investigation. While this is a legal process, the drill is to really, I would say, let the legal process, play out with the Texans. And he's very close to DeMeco Ryans, of course, played with him with the 49ers. They brought him here to play for the Texans, and they're even keeping him around at a high salary when you've replaced him as a starter, when you have CJ Gardner-Johnson and Calen Bullock. Yes, 2 plus 2 can equal 4 in terms of, well, he's not starting. This seems likely. I would just tell you, we don't know what they're going to do, how the Texans will go about it. The commissioner's exempt list could happen, suspension could happen, but generally this is a 6-game suspension is kind of the baseline for a situation like this. So would the Texans want to keep him if he was suspended? I don't know. These things, if you really want to take it a step further, could guarantees in his contract be voided? Absolutely. They could choose to do that if they want to.
That's Aaron Wilson of KPRC, colleague of mine. Thank you for stopping by, Aaron. Where can all of our listeners find all of your amazing work? I
appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me and for your kind words. So I am on television on KPRC, prominently on Sports Sunday with Randy McElboy and other appearances with Artie Alexander. I write for www.click2houston.com, which is free of charge. You can read KPRC's work and my work with my colleagues there at any time. Also, I am also on YouTube, and it's called Aaron Wilson Sport, and we do have a growing channel. I'm proud of my progress there. I started from 0 in October, and I was convinced to join this. Shout out to my friend Jordan Sterling, who convinced me to join YouTube Revolution, and it's better in many ways than, say, like the conversations you can have there than you can have, say, on Instagram or Twitter. They're all different, but I like them all. I'm also on Twitter and X, of course, Aaron Wilson _NFL, Instagram, Aaron Wilson 7128. I'm on a few other things, but those are my primary ones. And yeah, just appreciate you having me on, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Aaron.
Play recognition, knowing what to expect on down and distance, going out there so I can play faster instead of just really going out there and just playing on my athleticism, being a student of the game, and really taking advantage of all my opportunities. It's a lot of plays out there that I left on the field. I felt that if I would have made, I would have been in the conversations with the top safeties that everybody talk about. In the back end, we confident. Every day we know we got in the back end, we know we got the best back end. We feel like we the best back end. Like you said, everybody on the back end could take the ball away, and we know that from the nickel to both our corners to both our safeties. And that's what we preach, get the ball. Every single day we trying to go get the ball.
Go get the ball, young man. That's Calen Bullock, sophomore safety, who will be stepping into, I think, a role where the expectations for him will be a lot bigger. I just had an opportunity to speak with Aaron Wilson, and we're not going to talk too much more about the legalities of things surrounding Jimmy Ward. But the reality of the situation for that safety unit was the moment Houston traded for CJ Gardner-Johnson, there was going to be a limitation placed on Jimmy Ward in terms of playing if he was out there. The 6-game suspension, that would be at least 6 games Jimmy Ward has missed over the last couple of seasons, 3 seasons since he's arrived at Houston, if he will suit up for Houston this year. And so for the Houston Texans, hearing the year 2 growth from Calen Bullock, the safety, I'm excited to see. There were plays last year where, and I'm glad to hear him as a young player in the NFL kind of call out himself in the sense like, I left plays out on the field, right? There were times where the angles coming downhill, was not the best, and it allowed for open field plays, right? There were times where sometimes the running backs were able to kind of get past them, or a receiver in open space because of that. Like, so now I'm looking at Calen Bullock in his second year, and I'm looking at everything that he can build off on from year one, and I think that he's going to be surrounded with a guy that is not also how can I put this? Like Gardner-Johnson, he's going to be the coach on the field and off the field, but he's going to be on the field. He's going to be there. He's coming in with a Super Bowl pedigree that nobody else on this defense could bring, but it's also a blessing when that pedigree is in your coaching room, like in your film room, in your meetings. Like, he's going to be there in terms of what the player brings. And for Bullock and for the Houston Texans mainly, that's a huge boost. Bullock is one of those guys where, like, how the Houston Texans value Jalen Petrie and everything that he brings? Bullock is going to be that guy on the back end of the defense for a long time. He's going to be a player that, as he progresses, as he continues to get better and better, the Houston Texans, it's going to be hard to move on from him. And I hope that he's going to be a Texan for a long time, because I don't know the last time the Texans had a safety that was drafted to Houston be a staple. Like, and technically, we should say Jalen Petrie, but when I look at the staple that Jalen Petrie will be for Houston, it's down in the box. So the Houston Texans have not had a deep safety that they've drafted in a while that can be here and be an impactful player and won't just be a one and done type of player. Like, the young man had 5 interceptions last year. The young man made key plays in several games, several times. So he's going to be an important part of the Houston Texans defense that has some room to grow. They also have some opportunities to be the best defensive backfield in the NFL. We actually need the Houston Texans to come up with a cool name for them, because, like, Kamari and Bullock, they have, Hawk and Lock, but the entire unit needs a name. The one thing that I'm very eager to look at this year is if the offense can give Houston points. And if the offense does not end the year 8th in the NFL in punts per game, how much better will the defense be if they're not always out there fighting for their lives? So I'm excited, but I think year 2, Calen Bullock, going into his sophomore year, especially with CJ Gardner-Johnson back there with him, we're going to see a player that is much more well-rounded. May not see 5 interceptions, may just be 2 interceptions, but will we see the amount of yards per game given up? Will we see at the end of the year, will we see a high number of yards given up through the air? Will we see those missed tackles, right? And that's what I'm eager to see. Thank you guys for watching today's episode of the Locked On Texans Podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12. And also, if you missed the KHOU's Sports Extra, you can go check that out on KHOU's YouTube page. Check out the Sports Extra. I was on there Sunday night, and I didn't get a chance to tell you guys, but happy Father's Day to all of the Texan fans, Father Texans out there. Until next time, ladies and gents, peace.